Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Locked On Indians podcast. My name is Jeff Ellis. I'm the host of the podcast. If you're just listening to us for the first time, thanks to our recent partnership with WKYC Cleveland. Before I hosted the Locked On Indians podcast, I was the lead MLB draft and prospect analyst for 24/7 Sports and then scout before that. Now I get to talk about the Indians all the time. Normally, that's a really fun thing to do. Not so much tonight, not after game one of the postseason, a game that no one would have predicted the outcome and what we ended up seeing. I have a lot to talk about involving game one. There were some positives. We'll get into that. There were negatives. We'll dig into the performance, the players. And then for our second half of the show today, we're going to talk game two. We're going to talk about what's concerning heading into game two and what's advantageous about game two for the Cleveland Indians and why I think they are set up to win game two. Maybe I'm being hopelessly optimistic, but sometimes you have to be when you're a Cleveland sports fan, right? So let's get into game one. I want to thank everyone for just listening and watching the show. After a game like game one makes it so you kind of want to take a break from baseball for a bit. I totally get that, especially when you have the best pitcher on the planet and the guy who put up one of the greatest seasons in Indians history, which is saying something because we've had some great seasons in recent memory between Kluber, Sabathia, Cliff Lee. What Bieber did this year in a smaller sample blew those all out of the water. And you're looking at a guy who I believe had 12 starts over the course of this year and gave up 14 runs in those 12 starts. 7 runs given up today. That's, quick math. That's half as many runs in one start as he gave up during the entire season. It ties his previous high for runs given up in a game. Not an ideal time for him to have his worst start of his career. It was interesting if you were listening. I was watching the StatCast game. I don't really know how that differs from the normal one, but that was what I had on. That's what I chose. That when they interviewed Carl Willis, he just seemed to want to blame it on jitters. But I don't know if it was necessarily jitters. I think there's 2 big components to why Shane Bieber had such an awful game. The first one, if you've listened to the podcast recently, on Monday on this podcast, I talked about the Yankees had a secret weapon, and that was Matt Blake. He was mentioned briefly on the broadcast I was listening to. And Matt Blake was in the minors and helped develop Plesac, Bieber, and Savali. There is no coach, there is no person outside the Indians organization that knows the Indians pitching staff better than Matt Blake. And he helped the Yankees come up with a perfect plan for facing Shane Bieber. Now, normally you can put that perfect plan in place. That's a lot of P's there. And Shane Bieber is so good that it doesn't matter, or it would limit damage. But when he's having an off night, when he is not as sharp, when he is not hitting his spots quite the way he should, it was just a recipe for disaster. Now, on top of that, there's kind of a third reason too. Shane Bieber, if you look at his one weakness, he is prone to giving up home runs. He is prone to the long ball. Yankees had the most runs via the home run, or the highest percentage of their runs that came via home runs of any team in the American League. So it's a bad matchup for him. But again, when you're as good as Shane Bieber is on most nights, it shouldn't matter. But when you combine those 3 facts together, the inside information, the off night, and the worst team for him to face, that's when you end up giving up 7 runs and having your worst start of your career. Don't want to belabor the point too much. Shane Bieber has been so good that I'm just going to look at this as a blip, that maybe it was just nerves. The other point on the broadcast came across about him looking down, that, is there conspiracies of something wrong with the mound? It didn't affect Garrett Cole at all. It didn't bother him in the slightest. He looked every bit like the guy he had been in past years. 13 strikeouts, making the Indians look silly. Outside of Josh Naylor, that's our big positive takeaway. I think you can be positive about Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez. The Indians had 8 hits, 4 of them by Naylor. And Jose Ramirez had a hit and a walk, so he's the only other batter who reached base twice in this game. He knocked in the first run of the game. We'll talk about Naylor in a second. Rest of the lineup, Lindor has been scuffling a bit of late. He's kind of the face of the franchise, though. Jose Ramirez over the past few seasons has been the better offensive player. One could make the case he's been just the better player for the Cleveland Indians in terms of hot takes that you can put out there. They need a more consistent Lindor, and that's been an issue throughout this entire season, is his consistency. Franmil Reyes started the year really badly. Then for about a month and a half or so, he was the Indians' best hitter. And then he cooled down a lot and started swinging at everything again. Uh, Not what the Indians need. They need that guy who was, hitting everything and hitting it hard like he was in the middle of the year, especially going into Tuesday's game. Tanaka should eat Franmil Reyes up. It's a really bad matchup for him. And then Carlos Santana, the other player to talk about in terms of top of the lineup hitters. He had 3 home runs over the last week of the year. Before that, his previous 3 home runs, and I think he had, did he end with either 7 or 8? I can't remember right now off the top of my head. But the previous 3 took a month and a half. So I thought he was getting hot at the right time. Not a great game 1. I'm expecting and hoping for big things in game 2. I think he is a good matchup against someone like Tanaka who sits around the edges of the zone. With Santana's eye and approach, he might be an ideal candidate for the Indians to have a breakout performance in that second game. But let's talk Josh Naylor for a second. Let's dig into his performance. He is the big positive in this one. He is the guy that at least you can go back and be like, well, at least there was Josh Naylor, the big home run, and that was a no-doubter. Garrett Cole has been home run prone all year. A lot of hard hit percentage. I think he's bottom 10 in the league in that. I know he had a bad 3-game stretch, but he still got hit hard in other games as well. And Naylor took advantage of it. He also had 2 doubles and a pretty nice catch late in the game, jumping up against the wall. The stat I saw from Sarah Lang's S. Lang on Sports was that he becomes the 5th hitter in Indians history to have a 4-hit game in the postseason. In 2001 of the ALDS in Game 3, you had both Juan Gonzalez and Omar Vizquel have a 4-hit game. Manny Ramirez in the 1995 ALCS Game 2, and Vic Wertz in the 1954 World Series Game 1. So pretty elite company, and I think I saw it's the first time ever a player in their postseason debut had a 4-for-4 performance. So something you can cling to if you're an Indians fan. Overall, to me, this was more of a game that I saw as a 7-3 matchup. Those last 5 runs, Adam Cimber and Cam Hill are the last guys out of your pen. If this was a 25-man roster and not a 28-man roster, well, I guess now it's always going to be a 26-man roster. But if it's a 26-man roster, Adam Cimber isn't here. That's just the honest, the goodness truth. He's one of the last additions. I don't think he's in Cleveland in that case. And Cam Hill may not be either. They were there just to soak up innings when it was clear the game got out of hand. Those last 5 runs it makes the score look worse, but in the grand scheme of things, those are guys who are out there only because of where the score was. And if this was a close game, they're not anywhere near the mound. So yeah, I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna say that, well, Shane Bieber got out of his system. It's really more 7-3. Carlos Santana is gonna have a big game coming up, and Josh Naylor is announcing himself on a national stage. Let's keep it positive, right? Helping to support our show today is Ohio Verse Everyone. That's Ohio BS Everyone. If you are not familiar with Ohio Verse Everyone, it's a website that is devoted to all Ohio teams. So if you want to go read about the Indians and the Reds because you're hoping for a battle of Ohio, go check out Ohio Verse Everyone today. If you want to go read about Indians content in this game that is not 90% New York Yankees and 10% Cleveland Indians, go to Ohio Verse Everyone. That's Ohio VS Everyone. And Matt, who runs it, Matt Bretz, I have known for years on Twitter. Sorry if I butchered your last name, I probably did. Really knows the history, really knows the small details, does a lot of great articles and information on the Cleveland Indians. So if you want to go get a Ohio slant on sports, go check out Ohio Verse Everyone today. So second half of this show is about Game 2. Now I've already done a little bit of talking about why I think Franmil Reyes is not set up to succeed and why I think Carlos Santana is, but let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this matchup. I think on paper, Carlos Carrasco is a better pitcher than Tanaka. And I think you can go through pretty much every stat and pull that out to be the case, except for postseason experience and postseason performance. Tanaka, in his first 7 games, allowed 2 or less runs in the postseason. That was a record. When he was at 6, he was tied for the longest stretch of 2 or less runs allowed in your first 6 starts with Sandy Koufax. His eighth start was a real stinker. He gave up 3 runs. He has gone at least 5 innings in every single start in the postseason. And it's been kind of his calling card that he has been that guy for the New York Yankees. He has been a solid, steady arm. And in the postseason, he seems to take it up a notch. So you have a guy who this is what he's known for. If you are a Yankees fan, he is who you want on the mound, maybe even more so than Garrett Cole because of history and level of performance we have seen with Tanaka. The Indian side of things, Carlos Carrasco, surprisingly, this is just his second postseason start. He, due to injuries in 2016, was not part of the run to the World Series. And in 2017 and 2018, he only got 1 start as the Indians only lasted 1 round in those postseasons. He was fantastic in both of those starts. Both, unfortunately, were losses, though. It's why you can't really look at a loss necessarily as a great indicator stat or a great source of information because you need to look beyond it and see the data and the performance. And the data and performance show that Carrasco has pitched well when given those opportunities. And I think that's what you kind of want to look at and talk about in particular is Carlos Carrasco is now one of the elder statesmen. He spent a lot of time being the second or third option behind Corey Kluber and at points Trevor Bauer. And now he's the man in terms of he's been there. He's been with the Indians for so long. And he's been through a lot with this team. And that's something else you can't look past. An elimination game isn't scary to Carlos Carrasco. Carlos Carrasco a year ago was fighting cancer and beat it. And at the start of this year, even you look at performance-wise, I had people on this podcast being like, oh, he's going to be a great weapon in the bullpen in the postseason. He is going to be this great guy in the 8th inning. That's what's going to happen. I just don't think he's going to work as a starter. And he did have some struggles at the start of the year, but he came back strong and he earned the chance to be the number 2 starter for the Cleveland Indians. He performed well and he kept getting better as the year went on. And that's what you want. You want a guy who is going in the postseason at peak, and that's Carlos Carrasco. Again, as I was listening to the broadcast, I talked about the Indians need a hero. They need someone they can rally around who can make a big impact early. And I know the implication was they need an offensive hero. They need to stake a lead and get out. And they do need to do that because the Yankees didn't have to use any of their high leverage arms. So if Tanaka has a lead, he's only going 5, and they're going to go right into that deep pen of theirs. But if you're the Cleveland Indians, they have that hero and they have someone they rally around. And this team has rallied around Carlos Carrasco for the last 2 seasons. And even if you go back and think about the incident that happened with Clevenger and Plesac, when the players spoke about it, they always spoke about, we have Cookie and you have to worry and think about what this means to him. And if you think they aren't going to rally around Carlos Carrasco pitching on the mound tomorrow, then I think you're underestimating just how much he means to his teammates and to that team in general. He's the hero they need. He's the guy that this team can rally around. This is his chance for his 3rd postseason start. That's a big deal. This is, being on the big stage, a game that is going to be a national television game that still carries some cachet even today. He's going to get a chance to go out there and save his team. And again, no moment in baseball is too big for Carlos Carrasco because he sat there and before his cancer, even when he signed his first contract in Cleveland, he had to deal with a heart condition. So the guy who's overcome 2 serious illnesses and still comes out and plays at a high level. I'm a huge Carlos Carrasco fan. I think it's hard to be an Indians fan and not be, just knowing what he's overcome and the fact that this is a guy who's consistently taken less money because he loves Cleveland and wants to stay here. He's the guy you want on the mound. Yes, in an ideal world, you'd have Shane Bieber on the mound in any elimination game, and he would pitch like the Shane Bieber we saw in his starts during the season, not in that postseason start. But in the world we are now, where Bieber had that game and you don't have him as an option in game 2, I can't think of a better pitcher on the mound than Carlos Carrasco. On the Yankee side of things, they have the guy they want on the mound. So the Indians have to go out there and win a low-scoring affair. That's what's going to happen throughout the entire season. That's what happened. Even in game 1, the Indians scored 3 runs. Historically, throughout the year this year, when they scored 3 runs or more, they won. That was all they needed. The pitching was there. It was able to support them. And if you gave that much offense, the Cleveland Indians won a majority of their games, a high percentage. It didn't happen in game 1. Pitching was not there. And it's something that this team had come to expect, and it just didn't happen. Occasionally, things don't go right. They need to get another 3 runs. I think that's very possible to get 3 or 4 runs off Tanaka, especially when you're looking at Jose Ramirez. Like I said, I think Carlos Santana is set up to play well. I think Josh Naylor's got this chance to grow, to show even more, to take another step forward in terms of his performance. He has to have all the confidence in the world after it seemed that he could do no wrong in game one. So I'm predicting that even though they have a very tough opponent, even though the Yankees have a loaded offense and a fantastic bullpen, the Indians are going to pull through in game two. That they're going to rally around Carlos Carrasco, and they're going to do just enough to get to game three. In game three, all bets are off. Zach Plesac, at points this year, has been as good as Shane Bieber. It gives the Indians kind of an advantage in terms of whether the Yankees throw Garcia or Happ in a game three, but they need Carlos Carrasco to be peak Carlos Carrasco. They need the lineup to step up a little bit more, and they need to be able to get through so they can get that third game. This series is not over. Don't throw in the towel yet. There's a lot of reasons to think that the Cleveland Indians are still alive, and it begins with that starting pitching, which has been such a strength all year. And it is a moment for Carlos Carrasco to step up and kind of maybe have his signature Cleveland Indians moment. He does not have that in my mind yet in terms of on-the-field performance. This is his chance to have that moment for the Cleveland Indians. I've been Jeff Ellis. I'm the host of the Locked On Indians podcast. You can find me on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. I just had my first mock draft for the 2021 MLB draft go up. If you're curious about that, you can find the link on my profile. As always, I want to thank everyone who's downloading, listening, rating, and reviewing. It means so much for our podcast. I want to thank WKYC for this fantastic opportunity to join their whole production. It's a dream come true for a kid who grew up in Northeastern Ohio. And as always, go Tribe.